Hello and welcome to Writer Rant, author advice in 5 minutes or less because I have to get back to writing and so do you. So this week I'd like to talk a little bit about book divisions. So there's a lot of books that kind of follow what's called the 3-act structure, right? So you have kind of a beginning, middle, and an end. And within that, yeah, you can divide out and you can say, hey, this is part 1 of this book, and this is part 2 of this book, and this is part 3. So that's good for kind of showing, hey, here's the first part of the story, and then here's like the climax, and then here's the denouement, and all those kind of things, and that's great. You know, you can do that. The trick is it's best used when it's in that structure. You can do more parts, right? And that's fine. But if those divisions are called out, it really has to represent a very dramatic and drastic shift in the story, right? Either you're changing to a different character that you're going to follow, your location is going to be way different, some other huge thing that kind of like totally shifts which way the story is going to be going. That's when you do the divisions kind of within your book. It kind of works if there's, again, at least 3, maybe 5, any more than 5, you're kind of like, okay, this is getting a little too big in terms of which, part 1, part 2, and that kind of stuff. So within the book, you got to have those, otherwise, it's just going to be, well, how's this any different from the part that I just finished, right? It's just gonna, if it's just a slight continuation, nothing's really changed, then do you even really need the divisions at all? I read a book recently, and it had part 1 right at the beginning, and it went through all the chapters in the table of contents, which I talked about a couple weeks ago. There was no chapter titles or anything, and all these chapters, and it was just part 1. There wasn't even a part 2 or a part 3. And I get it if you're trying to make a series. If that's the case, make it book 1 of this series or book 2 of the series. Don't put within your book, this is part 1, because people are going to read it and they're going to expect a part 2 and a part 3. And when you don't deliver, it's like, well, wait a minute, this isn't finished, right? And so you really got to be careful with those kind of things because, again, it shows kind of where you are as a writer. If this is your first book and you have, part 1 and all these chapters and have, title names and a table of contents that's unnecessary, it just really shows kind of how amateur you are in terms of an author. So when you're dividing out your book, again, outlining is really important if you're planning out your book ahead of time. And so if you use your outline, then yeah, here's kind of where the divisions are, because going ahead, that, hey, this is where this great beginning section is, and here's where we build to the climax, and here's where the hero wins the day or whatever in the last part. Those are fine. You can have those divisions. But if you don't have that, if you just have, oh, hey, here's part 1, it's like, you don't need it, because it's kind of the point of most outlines is going to be, okay, under each point you got to have at least 2 to 3 other points. You can't just have bullet point and then bullet point, and then it's got to have more than that, right? And so that's just kind of the general way to do it. And so when it comes down to it is, yeah, if you got multiple books in the series, just call it out in the first page or so. Say, hey, this is book 1, right? This isn't part 1, this is just book 1, because it is an entire book that's part of a greater series. So anyways, that's something I noticed recently in one of the books I read. Have you noticed that in any books? I doubt it, but if you've ever found a book that only had a part 1 and no other parts, by all means let me know below, because it seems to be a pretty rare occurrence, and I just want to make sure the writers out there who are doing that they stray away from that mistake. If there's anything else that annoys you about writing or reading or whatever, drop a comment below and maybe I'll get to it in a future episode. So thanks for watching this episode of Writer Rant. I'm Benjamin M. Weilert.